And we're broadcasting live from 6th and Peabody and on OutKick.com. Alongside Chad Withrow, I'm Jonathan Hutton. No Paul today. He was giving a presentation earlier on behalf of Roone Artledge and his candidacy for the Pro Football Hall of Fame. We've got plenty of headlines to hit across the NFL, and every Tuesday, John McClain joins us to do just that. We kick off the hour with John, who has covered the league for 50 years plus, and he's also a Pro Football Hall of Fame selector, along with Paul. John, always great to see you. Hope you're doing well.
Well, I got some things that have been going on. Number one, I'm going to Astros tonight. Justin Verlander's pitching against Carlos Correa and the Twins. First time Correa's been back here since he signed with the Twins. They have a big video tribute to him coming, and they have kids from Uvalde and where they had the school shooting tragedy, and they're going to be there too. And then yesterday, I was in Dallas to go visit and meet Chuck Howley, the Cowboys outside linebacker who'd been retired 49 years, never been a finalist for the Pro Football Hall of Fame. I presented him to the Seniors Committee, as Paul's done with Roone Artledge today with the Coach Contributor Committee. And Howley made it. And so Howley, though, has a really bad case of Alzheimer's, but his son invited me over to talk to him, see if I could get through to him. So I went. He lives next door to Roger Staubach, and Chuck looked great, 86 years old, firm handshake. He's in a wheelchair, but you know, it is with advanced Alzheimer's, you don't know if you're getting through to him or not. So I talked to him about the Hall of Fame, Tom Landry, Tex Schramm, Staubach. He'd be in Canton, and I did it 3 different times as his son was showing us around his trophy room. And at the end, I tried again, and so I driving back to Houston. His son sent me a text. I can't believe this. He told his caregiver after we left, I'm going to the Hall of Fame. I need a new suit. And then broke down crying. And I was like to break down crying on the way from Dallas to Houston. And then shortly after, I found out that former Texans president Jamie Roots had killed himself. So it was a very, very emotional day yesterday for a whole lot of people down here.
John, it's certainly a lot going on. I guess I can ask you this now that Paul's not here today. How much delight are Astros fans taking in the Yankees' downfall these last couple of months?
Well, of course they are. And the problem, they're up about 3.5 games on the Yankees for home field advantage, and both of them will get first-round byes under the new format. But the Astros have not been playing great. They haven't been playing bad like the Yankees, but they haven't won a series. As you guys know, they blew 2 runs to the Braves, 2-run leads in the 8th, and they salvaged the last one. And then before that, they've blown a couple in Chicago. To me, right now, and I love baseball and I pay really close attention, I don't know that if the Braves and the Dodgers play right now, or the Braves and the Mets, and then the Braves and the Dodgers, I wouldn't go with Atlanta. Atlanta's got pitching, they got hitting, top to bottom, they're good fielding. It wouldn't surprise me at all if Atlanta didn't get a chance to defend its World Series title. And if the Braves do, I just hope it's against the Astros, because my buddy Jim Mattress McInville, our furniture salesman extraordinaire, and the country's most renowned gambler, will win $74 million if the Astros win the World Series. I believe that would be the biggest payout in history for any one individual.
74 million.
Incredible.
And that's not all at one casino, right? He's got to go around.
Oh, no, nobody takes his bets anymore. He has to go all over the country. It was a $10 million bet on the Astros. He went Lake Charles and another place in Louisiana and someplace Vegas for 2 each. Then he decided to do 4 more, and he went to a reservation in Iowa, then to MGM in Vegas for his 10, but nobody will take his full bets anymore because he wins too much.
Pretty soon he's going to have to go to Malaysia to place a bet. He's going to run out of places in the U.S.
He'll have a spot there, too, I'm sure.
Yep.
John, we don't know for sure where Brady was, although Aaron Wilson reported that he was in the Bahamas with his family. But he returns to the Tampa locker room and the Tampa practice field with a depleted offensive line. That's the bigger story than where Brady was 11 days ago, right?
Yeah, and I remember when Ian Rappaport broke that story, I thought it made sense, but I'm still stunned nobody got a picture. And he made a joke about the Masked Singer because he was wearing a mask when he had his picture taken. Now, if you had been taping the Masked Singer, would you want people to know it? Because that show, which I've never seen, is all about surprise. And there was an internet report. Not only was he taping it, he picked out a song about 7 rings. Now, if that show, I have no idea when it comes out, it's owned and televised by Fox, Brady's next employer that'll pay him $37 million a year. But it still wouldn't surprise me if he wasn't doing that, because he'd do everything he could to keep it a secret, because the whole idea of that show is to be a secret.
It premieres September 21st on Fox. And it's completely wrapped. They've wrapped up the season already, which coincides with when he returned on Monday to Tampa. But Chad and I said it wasn't Brady that caused the distraction. To us, it was more Todd Bowles and how he answered questions about this. He was here in Nashville last week for joint practice work with the Titans, where he stood up in front of a podium or in front of the Tampa backdrop with the media and said he wasn't really sure when Brady was going to return. And then Arians went on the preseason broadcast of week 2 with the Tampa crew and said, yeah, it's no big deal. He's going to return. He's not retiring. And then Bowles said, in fact, we do know when he's going to return. I just didn't understand the whole – it looked like confusion when there shouldn't have been any with this.
We all thought they botched it. But if indeed he was doing something like that, then they would have to have secrecy across the board. If he's going on a vacation with his family, why couldn't they just say?
That's a great point.
When Tom came back, he told us he's going to take off 2 weeks or 10 days. And he's going to go on a vacation with his family. You didn't have to say where. And then everybody be, oh, okay. There would never have been all the speculation about illness in his family. His mom had cancer. Rick Stroud from Tampa Times quickly put that to rest. So I'm sure they told him, no, it's not involving family. But if it was a vacation, it would have been so much easier. So I'm not giving up on the Masked Singer till the season is over, because everything that happened, they would all have to act like they didn't know. And I'm sure that if he did do that, they give him a window. And if he did go on vacation, more power to him. But they botched the thing from start to finish. It'd been better to say Tom and his family are going on vacation. He'll be back in 2 weeks. And then if he went to do the Masked Singer, great.
And John, that's the one thing at this point that if it comes out that he's revealed as one of the Masked Singers in months from now, that I'd go, oh, that's why they were so mysterious about everything. Nothing else would explain it, because it's just so easy to say what he's doing and not face any blowback from anyone about it. So it's an odd deal.
John,
Cadillac, think about this. Excuse me, Jonathan. Yeah. All the pro teams, not just in the NFL, if they were proactive and they got their version, they wanted to sell to the public out first. All the confusion, the conjecture with social media today, everybody's making a prediction. If you just come out, whether you're telling the truth or not, and say, this is what's happening, then people back away. But teams in most cases just can't seem to want to get on top of it. They'd rather be reactive than proactive.
John, the real storyline is the offensive line, where in the preseason game, Aaron Stinney goes down. He tears his ACL and his MCL. He's done for the year on injured reserve. Ryan Jensen's already there, injured early in camp, one of the veteran centers that came back because Brady helped him come back and wanted him there. They've already had 2 starters leave, either due to retirement or on a different roster. With what's in front of him, and I know there have been examples in New England where the offensive line has suffered an injury and they've had the next man up, and Brady has done a good job with this. But that to me is the area that can derail the Bucs early in the season, when it's going to be a storyline of Brady being 45, Brady taking 11 days off. To me, it's the offensive line and facing that Dallas front right out of the gate, where they've got to find some answers in either young pieces or guys that were not starting quality until right now.
Tom Brady has never suffered such debilitating losses, whether injuries, free agency, or retirement. And he's going to be taking a lot of 3-step drops, and the ball's going out. Fortunately for the Buccaneers, he may be the greatest quarterback in history, that when he breaks the huddle and he's walking to the line of scrimmage and he's looking over the defense, and then when he starts calling the signals, the defense makes changes. He can identify them. He's the best that's ever been to me. He and Joe Montana, and his coverages today are so much more complicated than they used to be. I mean, he's basically a genius up there. So I'm guessing a lot of quick drops, quick throws, a lot of short throws, a lot of West Coast offense, slants across the middle, everything designed to get rid of the ball fast. And it would be kind of nickel and diming down the field. He's got Chris Godwin back. He's got Mike Evans has been hurt, but he'll be ready. And he's the most underrated receiver in the NFL to me. And where it would hurt is the blocking for the run, and then the shortest path to Brady on a penetration and passing situations is up the middle, and that's where they're the most vulnerable. I think, though, if anybody can overcome those kind of colossal losses on the interior, it would be Brady.
The other storyline with Brady, we're just staying on the topic from the weekend, is the Bucs were really his fourth choice at best during the year where he could have played anywhere. We know he met with Miami based on the NFL investigation. His team growing up were the 49ers. It was out there that he wanted to play for San Francisco and follow his idol in Joe Montana there. Then you have Dana White through the Gronk broadcast of UFC 278, where Gronkowski had set Dana White up to tell the story how a deal was done in Vegas for Brady and Gronk to, in tandem, join that organization that Dana White was facilitating through ownership, and then apparently Gruden slammed the door on it. Your thoughts when you heard that, and the fact that Dana, post-fight press conference, he's like, yeah, by the way, he went on to Tampa and won a Super Bowl. You know, another dig at the fact that the Raiders are still trying to get there.
First of all, when I saw that, I'm thinking, why in the world would Mark Davis allow Dana White to talk to Brady and Gronk? Now, Davis played the fool when
Yes.
it came out. Well, what, me? I think as Mike Florio called him, Alfred E. Newman, what me worry? And of course he knew about it. They wouldn't have been doing stuff like that without Mark Davis knowing it. Of course, Davis can never act like he knew it because of he saw what happened to Stephen Ross for tampering. And I felt bad for Jimmy Garoppolo because when Brady was on that barbershop show with LeBron James, and he was telling his story about the unnamed team, and he said he told him, so you're going to stick with that bleeper? Everybody thought it was the 49ers and Garoppolo, when if this story's true, and we don't know if it is, he was talking about Derek Carr. And I think, oh boy, Jimmy G's more of a bleeper than Derek Carr is, but still, Gruden's going to get the blame for that.
Right.
I don't know why they had to disclose it right now, but I'll tell you what, why doesn't Brady get more criticism for all the controversy he generates and all the rules he breaks? You know, this would be, you know, the Miami stuff was that broke the rules. This would have broke the rules, and he was suspended for Babygate. He was involved in Spygate, and so there's a lot of things that he breaks rules, creates controversy, but we give him a pass because he's the greatest quarterback in history.
The connection between Dana White and Brady. Dana is a massive Patriots fan. Loves the city of Boston, is a huge New England Patriots fan, and he's buddies with Kraft and Brady. And Gronkowski was there with his family doing the broadcast. And Dana White said at the press conference for the UFC event, he didn't really want to tell the story, that Gronk set him up, and he was kind of looking at him like, you really want to go with this? And in the press conference, he apologized to Mark Davis for telling the story. He says, I'm sure Mark is ticked off at this right now. And apparently Gronk confirmed it on the air that this was a thing, that the facilitator was Dana White, who owns a massive suite in the new stadium that Mark Davis built and lives in Vegas. And he wanted Brady there and was trying to recruit him there and had him, apparently, except for the fact that Gruden, Chad pointed this out yesterday, had all the power without Brady there in his offense. And if Brady's there, then we know who's running the offense. It's not John Gruden.
If he's such a Patriots fan, he should have brokered a deal for him to go back to New England.
Well, it's crazy, but it is one of those where Dana White was presented with something that was already stated, and said, "You want to fill in the blanks on this?" live on air, and then went ahead and told the story.
Dana, tell the story about what happened. He
why we didn't go to
Really? Vegas?
And he,
Okay.
it's crazy.
And Mark Davis says, I don't know what you're talking about.
It was a perfect non-verifying quote without saying that it actually did happen.
And John, you're right. It is an interesting situation where Tom Brady went from hated New England Patriot villain to Teflon on any story because he became himself on Twitter and Instagram. I feel like that's really what changed. He left New England and he showed more personality, and he doesn't get criticized for anything.
Also,
none of the raw stuff. The
other thing too, guys, is every fan in the NFL would love for Tom Brady to leave New England and play for their team. So I don't think fans really care about tampering rules in the NFL. I just don't think that moves the needle.
No, they don't.
I don't think deflating footballs is all that big of a deal if you polled the average NFL fan. I think they're interested in the storyline, but they really don't care what happens one way or the other to the guy.
It's a big story if you hate the Patriots, which most did for a long time.
And the fact that he broke all the rules and nothing happened to him. It happened to Stephen Ross. Why wasn't Brady penalized in some fashion for what happened with Ross, and he wasn't? And now he takes vacation right in the middle of training camp. If they start slowly, and Chad, you mentioned this earlier, about you lose and people will look at other reasons like in the interior offensive line. What if it's better than people think?
Yeah.
And he's off target? And then people say, well, if you hadn't taken that vacation, you might be a little more on target. That's just like with Aaron Rodgers. If he's off target a little, it's well, if you come in the off-season program to work with these new receivers, and if you played in the game to work with these new receivers, maybe they'd be ready to play more than they are since you didn't do anything.
I think there's a lot of pressure personally on Aaron Rodgers to get that second Super Bowl, not for his personal statistics and what he's done. He's one of the all-time greats. But to get that second Super Bowl, there's a lot of pressure on him. John, I don't think there is any pressure on 45-year-old Tom Brady. He could go out there and he could be worse than Sean Mannion.
He could be 2019 version Tom Brady.
He could be the 32nd ranked quarterback in the NFL and worse than everyone else. And I would just look there and say, great. He's a 45-year-old guy he brought a Super Bowl to Tampa after leaving New England all those Super Bowls. It is all icing on the cake for Brady. I would not criticize him about any time away in training camp. And I don't think many people would either because he's done it all at this point. He's 45. At some point, he's going to start to not be as good, you would think.
He's going to hit a wall at some point and he'll walk away. He's not there for the money. He's under pressure, and it's pressure self-inflicted because he's a perfectionist. He wants to win. He wants everything to be perfect. And I'm guessing, I don't know why he didn't just talk to the media and say, when I retired, I told Giselle, promised her we'd take a vacation in August. And so that's what we did, if indeed that's true.
Here's the thing about Brady that I'll never get over. 2019, the Titans go in the wild card round and win that sloppy game. Derrick Henry takes over, but Logan Ryan intercepts Brady in his final pass in Foxborough and returns it for a touchdown. And I thought at that time he's done. Like I didn't think if you would have told me in 2021 at the age of 44, he's going to lead the league in pass attempts and touchdown passes amongst all the quarterbacks that are out there, I would have called you crazy. So even if he plays like a 45-year-old quarterback this year, I would still bet at 46 he could return to the 21 version of himself. That's what he's done by rebounding off of the 2019 season, John.
I don't think that if he plays bad, it'll be because of him. Because you don't go from having the kind of season he had last year to all of a sudden, falling off a wall. I think if they don't have a good season, it'll be about the problems that we talked about in the interior line. Could be the running game, could be something with the defense, but I don't think for a second it's going to be Brady's problem because he was too great last year.
John McClain with us. We'll shut the door briefly on the Brady discussion, and when we come back, did you see what Saquon Barkley had to say? Saquon Barkley, who we've barely talked about over the last couple of years, he's on a terrible team with the New York Giants. and it's on him. He's got to stay healthy, and he is motivated to do so. We'll compare his comments from last year at this time to this year's mindset, and it's vastly different. We'll get John's take on that, plus the quarterback battles. Kenny Pickett he's playing very well this preseason. Trubisky is also. We'll get John's take on how Tomlin will handle that decision, plus Baker Mayfield is the QB1 in Carolina. A lot to discuss with John McClain next on OutKick 360. John McClain with us on OutKick 360, talking NFL headlines. The New York Giants, with Saquon Barkley in their backfield, they have not won more than 6 games in a season since he arrived. And it was the 2018 draft when he was selected second overall. And now he's looking to change that aggression and the mindset. John, here's the quote on the Second Wind podcast, to give them full credit. Last year was more like, dang, the game was taken away from me. I never had a season where I didn't go and play football. Now it's a kill mindset. Now it's like, you know what? F everybody. I'm ready to go crazy. Your thoughts on Saquon Barkley going into this season with that mindset, which we have not heard from him before, considering the team that they're taking into the 2022 season?
Barkley had a great rookie season. He had over 1,300 yards rushing, 11 touchdowns. He had almost 2,000 yards rushing and receiving and 14 touchdowns. And last year he played 13 games and he didn't get to 600 yards. He scored like 2 touchdowns the last 2 years because he'd blown out his knee. But, that's a great attitude for him to have. People are critical of him, but he was hurt. He plays behind a terrible offensive line. Jury's still out on Daniel Jones as a quarterback. But if I got a running back and he's talking like that, I think that's great. Next thing to do is for him to go out there, stay healthy, and show that he can do the promise he showed as a rookie. The next year he had 1,003 yards, but he hadn't played a full season since his rookie year, and you can't back that up if you don't stay on the field.
Quincy Avery becomes a very important name in the NFL, and most people don't know that name. It's Deshaun Watson's personal quarterback coach, who now he goes to work with until I believe it's late October before he can rejoin the team for meetings with the Browns before rejoining the actual roster on the field in early December. John, what can you tell us about Quincy Avery and his work with Deshaun Watson?
He has been coaching Watson since Watson was in high school. It might even be middle school. He's like a father figure to Watson. When Watson has traveled the world, Avery's gone with him. I'll give you a great example. In 2020, Watson's last season here, he was great that season, but he had an awful game here and lost to the Panthers. So about 3 hours after the game, we're still working in the press box, and somebody says, hey, look down there. Is that Watson? And there was Watson and Quincy Avery. He comes to his games. I think if they had gone to eat, they'd come back, they'd gotten a football, and they were going up and down the field with Avery telling Watson what he had done wrong in that game to play so bad. So he trusts Quincy Avery probably more than he trusts anybody who's not in his immediate family. And Avery will have a plan designed for him that, of course, he's gotten from the Browns. Can't have any contact with the Browns till October 10th. And so Avery will have somebody catching passes for him as he gets closer to going back. He'll have things designed about pressure, and he will put him in circumstances that would be the best possible thing for a quarterback in Watson's predicament.
John, speaking of the Browns, they're going to open against Carolina in Charlotte against their former quarterback, Baker Mayfield. Baker Mayfield was asked about being the starter and opening against Cleveland, and I loved his honest response. He said, yeah, it's going to mean a lot. This game's going to mean a lot to me. I'm not going to sit up here and pretend to be a robot about it. This personally means a lot to me playing the Browns. I don't know that I would call that an underrated Week 1 matchup, but when it's Jacoby Brissette versus Baker Mayfield, but really Baker Mayfield versus his old team, what do you think about Mayfield's comments and that game?
First of all, Chad Lack, we've known he's going to be the starter since they made the trade. He's healthy. He's playing for a new contract. He's getting motivated by the disrespect he believes he got from the Browns and a lot of members of the media that he went to war with. And if you're going to play Mayfield, I don't think this is the best time to do it. Like, to me, if you're going to play Deshaun Watson, as the Texans will, in Houston, the best time to do it is when he's coming off the suspension and didn't play the year before, because common sense just tells you he's got to have some cobwebs. But in Mayfield's case, I love his honesty. I always hate it when a player or a coach, you know how much it means to them, and it's just another game. and you roll your eyes because you know it's not true. And it wouldn't surprise me at all, since Christian McCaffrey is going to be healthy, because he hadn't been healthy a lot the last 2 years, that he'll be healthy. And it wouldn't surprise me if it's close, and I wouldn't even be surprised if the Panthers didn't pull the upset over Jacoby Brissette.
John, it's always odd now when you see a player not get what he wants in a holdout, especially a really good player. Roquan Smith didn't like the offers he was getting, decided to hold out for a bit, and then came back and said, you know what, forget about it. I'll rejoin the team and play out this contract. But what did you make of the back and forth with Roquan Smith and the Bears?
He's at the wrong position to get a big contract. He's an off-the-ball linebacker. There's not a big demand for them. If you're a wide receiver and you touch the ball, or quarterback, and plus the fact receivers are such prima donnas today. And once one got it, another one got it. Everybody wanted it. But I guarantee you, if Roquan Smith had got the contract he wanted, we'd be seeing off-ball linebackers lining up to try to get it. And I think he did a great job. Hopefully he'll come back, play well, and get the kind of contract he wants. Guys, I am for every player getting every penny they can get, because the owners have got billions.
Speaking of big-time contracts, John, Lamar Jackson, there was a report out that the Ravens have offered more to Lamar Jackson than what the Cardinals offered to Kyler Murray, which I'm thinking, yeah, that's a no-brainer. Lamar Jackson's looking for the guaranteed contract. Lamar Jackson's looking for Deshaun Watson money, not Kyler Murray money. So I don't know why that was such a big deal in a headline in Baltimore.
Well, that report said that the Watson contract complicated it. Well, anybody could see what they're talking about.
Right.
Kyler Murray got $231 million. Now, people know he's not going to collect all that money. And you got 107 guaranteed. Watson got $230 million guaranteed against skill and injury. That is the complicating factor. Lamar Jackson told somebody, I don't need an agent to tell me I need more than 230. So that's what he's asking for. And the Ravens don't want to do it. And the Chargers and the Bengals certainly don't want them to do it, because if they do it, next year Justin Herbert and Joe Burrow are going to want more. And like I said, the owners got it. Their franchises are worth $5 billion, and because of streaming and gambling, they're expected to double over the next 5 years. So, get it if you can. And I think, it's tough. I think Lamar Jackson's the kind of quarterback, if they don't get it done, then he's going to shut it down and gamble on himself, but he's not going anywhere. They can franchise him. So if he's offered $200 million guaranteed, why not take it? Why do you have to have the most when you can be set for life, and your kids set for life, and their kids set for life?
John, tying in the running backs discussion that we had with Saquon Barkley and tying in Carolina. So you've got Baker Mayfield playing on a one-year contract here. He's looking for more. Same for Daniel Jones. Daniel Jones is on a worse team, top to bottom, than what Baker Mayfield's going into, although Daniel Jones should have a better grasp on that system because he's been there the entire offseason compared to Baker. Who means more? And I think I know your answer. Who means more to their quarterback at the running back spot, Christian McCaffrey or Saquon Barkley?
I think that neither team is going to be very good, since both the running backs have been injured. But because Mayfield is the one getting most of the attention outside New York, I would say he needs Christian McCaffrey more than Daniel Jones needs Saquon Barkley.
Is this Ezekiel Elliott's last season in Dallas?
He needs to pick it up. When you watch Zeke Elliott and Tony Pollard carry the ball, this has been going on a couple of years because the Texans play him every year in preseason. Pollard's quicker. He makes quicker cuts. And maybe Zeke Elliott, who has a humongous contract, he'll bounce back, be really good, but he's not going to get another contract for more money. But the Cowboys, if they don't play Tony Pollard more than they have, their running game is not going to be as consistently effective as Jerry Jones and Mike McCarthy want it to be. Elliott's contract and his ego cannot get in the way.
Did you see, I know you saw it, John, Chad, Jerry Jones's comments on Antonio Brown?
Yes.
So Antonio Brown said that the Cowboys need to give him a call, and Jerry Jones replied, "We're good." And he went on to say, we want to give these young guys a chance, but starting that by just, we're good. I mean, that shuts down any opportunity there. And I don't know why Brown continues to chirp like he's going to end up back on an active roster.
Because he needs the ego massage every time he says something or puts something on social media. People react to it. And I think he needs that. I think that was a big part of his career. He needed the attention because he did so many things to create attention. And I'm happy Jerry Jones didn't bite because they don't need that head case.
Well, John, Antonio Brown or Deshaun Watson proves that sometimes, an ego massage is better than an actual massage. So at least Antonio Brown has that going for him. Those are the only type of massages he's trying to get.
There's a convention, I think it's this week, going on in downtown Cleveland for the National Massage Association.
It's amazing to me.
Where is Watson?
With all of this, John, that when asked about, he's not owning up to anything. He continues to deny any wrongdoing. And then the response from the league, well, he's going to come to the realization that what he was doing was wrong in this counseling that he's undergoing. I'm thinking, what is the point other than saving face if you're the league, just saying, well, he's got to go to mandated counseling. But if someone feels they haven't done anything wrong, what's the point of the counseling? It's an odd arrangement between the two.
He never assaulted anybody, and he never disrespected anybody, even though Sue L. Robinson said he was guilty of nonviolent assault, and his behavior was egregious, and he went in thinking about sex, not a massage, but he says he doesn't do anything. At some point, his people who have enabled him are going to say, Deshaun, you have to tell the counselor, you know what, I've seen the light. You're right. But the fact is, he's not real smooth when it comes to talking off schedule. Like one of the biggest ridiculous things is he had a statement through the Browns with all the right things. He didn't write it. He didn't approve it. PR people wrote it. And then when he was asked, he couldn't even remember what they said. So that's when he said he's, stand on my innocence. That's when he got killed again. But by the time he comes back, it will be ingrained in him. Yes, you're sorry for everybody you hurt.
John, leave us with this. Give us what was the temperature like, the reaction like in Houston on radio there whenever it was announced that he was returning after an 11-week suspension, has a bye week then, and then will be on the road in Houston. The league just so happens to settle on week 11 or game 11 as the time when he can return to the active roster and actually play in the regular season. It just so happens to be against the Houston Texans, which they scheduled in December.
Nobody projected a schedule of an odd number of games. I never saw that anywhere. And I think they did it to further punish him, put him in a situation where, from a competitive standpoint, he would want to be, because the Texans are not good. But there's going to be so much booing. There'll be women's groups protesting outside. It'll be a circus. There could be obscene chants. I think he's going to get that every game. And he was asked about it by the Cleveland media, and he said, that's too far ahead for me to be thinking about. But I'll guarantee you, there's a reason behind it, and the reason is to put him in what should be an uncomfortable situation, even though nobody will ever admit that. And people here are glad. I'm glad he didn't get a 12-game suspension, because imagine the buzz. What the big deal is here is for Texans fans not to sell their tickets to Brown fans who will pay a lot of money to see Watson's debut with Cleveland.
John McClain. You can follow him on social media at McClain_on_NFL. John, thank you as always. We will catch up with you next week. And next week, we can finally say the preseason is behind us.
And next week, Jonathan and Chadlock, I will be telling you guys about a new venture I'm doing, in which I'm going to be writing a whole lot of columns about the Texans, the AFC South, college football, and I look forward to being able to tell you guys. Thank you very much.
John, I'm excited about that.
John.
I thought you were about to break the news. You're going to talk about your old band when you came back next week.
I tried to get this new venture to use the band name blank.com.
I think it's taken.
It's probably also highly profitable. That's probably a profitable website as well.
I just wish I'd gotten the domain name back then. Thank you, guys.
All right. There's John McClain. Again, follow him on social media.
If we could, we've got connections here in Nashville. If we could secure the Ryman for the venue? Could we get John's band back together if they had a Ryman show?
I don't think the Ryman would host. I think Cobra would host it though.
We definitely have connections at Cobra if we could make that happen.
They would need.
But what level of
it would take a venue like that? We could not disgrace a former church like Ryman Auditorium.
Basement East, would that be another spot for the band? I'm trying to think. Third Man Records, would they be willing to host John's old band? The name that we'll never reveal.
I don't know. It's it definitely takes it down a notch.
For those that are new to the show, John McClain was in a band in the 70s.
In high school.
In high school, right out of high school, maybe right out of college a little bit too. And the name of the band is shocking, and we've never publicly stated it.
Yeah.
So
we can't.
It's a running joke about us revealing the band name.
Coming up, our spotlight on the SEC continues on OutKick 360 with Ole Miss and the Lane Train. We discuss what we expect to see from the Rebs. That's next on OutKick 360. Let's head to Oxford, shall we, Chad? OutKick 360 rolls on.
I never pass up an opportunity to go to Oxford, Mississippi. It's a lovely village.
Well, especially whenever they're in the midst of a 10-win season, which they were last year. For the first time in program history, Ole Miss won 10 games, went on to play in the Sugar Bowl. Matt Corral plays, gets hurt, and the big question going into 2022 now is, now that Corral is, well, he's on IR now, but he's in Carolina. Now that he is no longer on this team, how do they replace him with Jackson Dart? They lost Jeff Lebby. They lost DJ Durkin as their OC and their co-defensive coordinator. But look at the offense. Ole Miss ranked 4th nationally with 507 yards per game. They were 3rd in the SEC with 36 points per game. And to win, they've got to stay above 30 points. Keep in mind, Mississippi State finished 8th in scoring last year with Mike Leach's offense, and with that quarterback, they scored 29 points per game. That was good for 8th. So how do they keep their head above water? And the watermark to me is 30 points per game with Jackson Dart, knowing that Matt Corral is not there. Top 4 rushers, their top 3 receivers are gone. Charlie Weiss Jr. is now the offensive coordinator. Maurice Crum joins from Western Kentucky to help run the defense with Chris Partridge. Kiffin went all in the transfer portal, and it delivered some quality and quantity in that area. But it's all got to come together in a relatively short amount of time, including at quarterback.
Curious how big the departure of Jeff Lebby to Oklahoma is going to be for this team. That's one to watch. DJ Durkin's another one who was great with Ole Miss's defense. They were terrible 2 years ago. They were very respectable a year ago.
Yeah,
got
they were
a lot
okay.
better
They got
on defense. Yeah, they got a lot better. So how big is that loss with DJ Durkin going to A&M, Jeff Lebby going to Oklahoma? Ole Miss loses their top 4 rushers from a year ago, but they bring in Jackson Dart, who's going to be a rushing threat, much like Matt Corral. They bring in Zach Evans from TCU, Ulysses Bentley IV from SMU, 2 of the best running backs in the portal.
Yep.
Top 3 receivers are gone. This is where I don't think they really replenished the same way. Jonathan Mingo, nice player, not a number 1. Jordan Watkins was the former second leading receiver at Louisville, who's a transfer. That's a spot to watch offensively. Defensively, I think they're going to be even better from a talent perspective. J.J. Pegues coming in from Auburn is a big get. They've added some other transfers on defense. I think they're going to be fine defensively. Hutton, this team is every bit as talented as last year's 10-win team. It's just this whole experiment of, can you just completely turn over a roster, losing 11 starters, bringing in this amount of transfers
it's a college basketball
to play immediately?
Theme.
It's that. I'm reading the anonymous coaches review.
Yeah, what are they saying at Athlon?
At Athlon, and they say, culture's a real thing, the coach says. So does the culture carry over? You don't know. And it's also, the coach took a shot at Lane Kiffin and said, Jeff Lebby handled a lot of the stuff internally with that program when Lane wasn't around, ... That he filled in a lot of the blanks, not just offensively, but a lot of things with the entire program that Lane Kiffin wasn't. Now, again, that could be a rival coach that doesn't like Lane Kiffin for something on a recruiting trail, saying something that may not necessarily be true, but it made me think about the loss of Jeff Lebby. But Ole Miss, if Jackson Dart is anywhere close to Matt Corral, which he has the talent to be that, they are going to run like a well-tuned engine once again, just like last season. I think it all comes down to quarterback.
So I don't think they surpass anywhere close to the numbers that we saw a year ago offensively. I think they average more than 30 a game, though, without getting anywhere near the Matt Corral status. And here's why. I think a lot of people are looking at what they've lost and how they're replacing them and not really looking at the schedule. Like, I want to predict Ole Miss to not be as good. Their schedule is perfect. Here are their first 7 games. Troy, Central Arkansas, Georgia Tech, Tulsa are their first 4.
4-0.
Kentucky, Vandy, Auburn are the next 3. All but 2 of those games are in Oxford. All right? That's
Kentucky's
a great start.
toss-up.
But here's the other key. They face a number of opponents coming off tough weeks. They face Bama after Bama went to Baton Rouge to take on LSU. They take on Alabama the week later. I know it may not matter, but they're an example. They face Auburn after Auburn goes to Georgia. That's Auburn's first road game of the season at Georgia. They then get Ole Miss. They will play LSU after LSU is in Gainesville against the Gators. And they take on A&M after A&M visits South Carolina. So those are all teams coming off tough road conference opponent matchups, and they get Ole Miss, where I think towards the back end of the season, that's where they should really, you want to talk about team chemistry, that's where that should actually come together, is around the end of October, early November. But the schedule sets up for them to really work through some issues and still have a very respectable record while we look up and go, what's Lane Kiffin up to at Ole Miss and Oxford this year? I don't know if they get to 10 wins, but the first 7 games sets them up on that course. To get to 10 wins, they have to go to Knoxville, for instance, last year, and win a game they had no business winning because they have a quarterback in Joe Milton that comes in that doesn't know how to stop the clock, even though he's a veteran quarterback for coming off the bench for the Volunteers. He has no sense of clock management in that matchup. Just small examples there, outside of the golf ball and the mustard. But the games like that are going to take place. They're going to, when they play Bama, it's probably very similar to what we saw, unless they're going to miraculously convert on some fourth down attempts early in a game. And then the game doesn't get away from you by the halftime. But to get to 10, Ole Miss needed some things to bounce their way. They got that a year ago, and that's to their credit. So I don't know if they have the same type of bounces, Chad, but the schedule allows them to get to 5 and 6 wins within the first 7 games on their schedule, and that is a huge benefit to Kiffin this year.
I don't think they're going to be an underdog in a game until their 9th game of the year, possibly. You mentioned those first 7. Kentucky's going to be a bit of a toss-up, but I'd say a field goal favorite at home in Oxford. Then they go to LSU, which is very winnable. Then they go to Texas A&M. But they got a bye week after that. That's where the schedule gets really tough, but I think 9 wins is very easily, not easily, but it's definitely in play for the Rebels this year.
Is USC being honest about Brew McCoy transferring to Tennessee? We'll discuss that. Plus, odds are out for Rookie of the Year in the NFL. We'll give our take next. In 20 minutes, we will break down the 49ers and Seahawks from the NFC West. OutKick 360 rolls on across the OutKick network. Big headline, non-football related. Kevin Durant is apparently coming to terms with the fact he's going to stay in Brooklyn after all this. They've met on the West Coast, I believe.
In L.A.
With team ownership, head coach Steve Nash, and Durant, and they've agreed to continue playing basketball in Brooklyn together. I did not expect that outcome. I'll be honest.
What would have been an amazing outcome if Steve Nash just went full DX and just said, if you don't let me be in the coach here, I got 2 words for you. And just shows up to L.A. to do that and then gives them the symbol. It's a weird story that all of this, he flies to, where did they meet with the owner originally? In London? Maybe it was out of country.
Yeah, I think that's right.
And he has this
Somewhere
sit down
Europe.
with the owner, and it went well. We're still, we want to be traded as long as the GM and the head coach are here. You've got reports of the Memphis Grizzlies getting involved in a possible trade yesterday.
Which would be insane.
It took one sit down with the coach, GM, owner, and now I'm good. I'm going to play out this amazing contract I signed with Brooklyn for tons of money. I'll go ahead and do that for you guys since you flew out to L.A. to meet with me.
This is where I am extremely hypocritical, and I'm raising my right hand to admit it, because I'm anti-Kevin Durant and all the antics that he pulls where he needs to be loved. Kevin Durant needs to feel the love and hear the love and be recruited constantly. We've seen it since the movement with Oklahoma City. But when the report came out that Memphis could be involved, I immediately thought, I love this. I hope Memphis shows him the love. Because Kevin Durant there instantly takes them from just a great storyline trying to make the Western Conference Final to they are a true championship contender with Durant and Ja Morant. That would have been fun to watch. So I admit, his addition to any team instantly makes them a contender. But there's no reason why they can't be a contender in Brooklyn and why you can't be happy in Brooklyn where, 3 years ago, you sign off on Steve Nash as your coach, 2 years ago. And now all of a sudden he's the problem. I don't buy that angle of it.
I'm for whatever makes things more interesting. But I think the situation in Brooklyn is very interesting. I mean, Kyrie Irving, Kevin Durant, Brooklyn, you're in the biggest city in the U.S.
Right.
I mean, what's not to like about the drama with that? With Steve Nash, a very recognizable basketball name as the head coach.
Well, there are
That's
many,
an interesting situation.
Even during the season, though, people were saying he's not the greatest coach.
No.
But Durant is the reason why he's there.
But, I mean, how many coaches
I know.
are truly elevating these NBA teams?
I'm with you.
Outside of maybe agree. 3 or 4.
I agree.
I put, Greg Popovich, Eric Spoelstra. How many are on that list of coaches
Not
that
many.
elevate who they have, other than just getting along with the players? I'm watching this legacy documentary on Hulu about the Lakers. Highly recommend, by the way. It's way better than the one on Apple that's Magic Johnson directed. Magic's a big part of it, but it's directed by Antoine Fuqua, who's a big-time Hollywood director. But it's a multi-episode, basically when Jerry Buss buys the team forward. Mm-hmm. So from 1979 on. But, I mean, a lot of what they're dealing with in 1982 with the Lakers is, which I didn't know about, Magic Johnson demanding to be traded, or they fire the coach at the time, Paul Westhead. Well, guess what happened? Guess who won? Coach gets fired midseason.
Yeah.
They have Magic Johnson on a 25-year, $25 million contract, which $1 million a year for Magic Johnson at the time was unheard of. But my point being, when Pat Riley joined that team, Pat Riley is on camera joking about it. He's like, what does a coach in the NBA do? He's the guy who stands up and he puts his hands in the air and he yells the refs. He says, 5 up, 1 down, whatever. So I'm the one doing all this trying to look like an NBA head coach. And Magic Johnson comes to me and says, Coach, sit down for a little bit. We got this. We got this on the court. We know how to play this offense. We'll be just fine. That's sort of the way I view coaching in the NBA.
Me too. There's a handful of coaches.
Keep your guys happy.
That move the needle. And then the rest of it is just ego massage. And that's what this is. I don't blame Durant for voicing his opinion if what you signed up for and what you recommended isn't working. But demanding out just because things aren't going well isn't always the solution when you can win where you are based on additions. And maybe in this case it's addition by subtraction, but it doesn't mean you have to be the one that's out in order to get it done. And it's always this got to feel the love mentality. And people do. I mean, a number of organizations are trying to trade for him.
It's
and
it's
going to be a high price to do it.
I mean, look, this is in the past if they go on and win a championship, but this story's never going to leave. The moment they have a little losing streak, the moment he looks unhappy on the court and people read into body language, now that this is out there that he's was demanding this trade and this was the offseason drama, this is a story that's not going to leave Brooklyn.
Well, I'm interested now to find out what demands are going to be met by Steve Nash because he was in this meeting. He's the one that they wanted out. So the fact that they're running it back's a bad way to describe this, but the fact that he's returning based on reports, and it seems like Nash is also returning, what will be things that Durant wanted changed and what he demanded versus what he agreed to ultimately? And clearly not every demand was granted because he wanted out.
He probably owns part of the team now or something.
Maybe.
We'll find out later.
A couple of NFL headlines just to pass along, and then we're going to jump into the Tennessee Vols and USC Trojans and a transfer that's not happening yet. Bengals safety Jesse Bates, he has ended his holdout. He is reporting to camp. He is signing his franchise tender. He's back. He's playing. And another example of trying to hold out to get a long-term deal. The Bengals did not give him that. He's signing the franchise tender, which is fully guaranteed, and he will play this year. Bad news in Washington. Chase Young, who tore his ACL, this was against Green Bay, and I want to say it was around week 11, week 12, week 13, somewhere in there last year, November-ish. He has been placed on the reserve, physically unable to perform list. He has been there, but now that's for the regular season. This means he does not count towards the active roster whenever the final cut down is made after September 1st going into week 1. He will, mandatory, if you're on the PUP list to begin the season, you have to miss the first month, the first 4 games of the regular season. So we will not see Chase Young in Washington on that defense until at the earliest October. The Cowboys, they have not placed wide receiver Michael Gallup. I'll get it right in a moment. Gallup is currently on the preseason PUP, not on the regular season PUP list. He's coming off a knee injury that was right at the end of the regular season last year. He still at least has the option, and they have another week to determine this, has the option to be a week 1 guy. And they have not lost hope on that yet. And J.C. Jackson, the former Patriots cornerback, big money player in Los Angeles for the Chargers, he had ankle surgery, and he's going to be out at least a month or so for the Chargers. The good news for L.A. and their defense, they have Asante Samuel Jr. They have Bryce Callahan, who I believe mainly is a nickel, but he's also playing the corner position. They have a veteran backup in Michael Davis, who's been in the league now 6 or 7 years. They have Trayvon Campbell as a backup corner as well. But at safety, they have a great tandem in Derwin James and Nasir Adderley. Of course, they have Khalil Mack up front. They have Bosa. They have Joey Bosa on their defense. They'll be able to weather the storm, but when J.C. Jackson gets back, that's a defense for fantasy players out there I would want to buy in on.
We talked about Josh Palmer yesterday with the Chargers, Hutton. I went back and watched some highlights of him in the preseason game. Impressive. The one touchdown run on the screen pass where he just bullied 3 guys into the end zone at the end of it was something else.
Another note, the Lions rookie wide receiver Jamison Williams, we're not expecting him to be ready for the regular season opener. He's not.
Hard Knocks tonight, and I am all in on Hard Knocks on HBO. We're going to talk about another HBO show.
Is he on that show so far?
Not yet. Episode 3 tonight. I think he'll probably appear there. We're going to talk about another small little HBO show and a feat that it reached on from Sunday night later in the show. But I will be watching Hard Knocks tonight. I'll have a full report tomorrow.
Jamison Williams moved to the non-football injury list today. Of course, the college injury would count as that, even though it was a football injury where he tore his ACL. From that wide receiver to another very good one in Brew McCoy, who is not eligible to play for the Tennessee Volunteers, at least not yet. Trey Wallace had the story over the weekend at OutKick.com where USC provided official comment to Trey and OutKick about this saga between Brew McCoy and whether or not he's going to be granted eligibility to transfer and play for the University of Tennessee. The quote from USC, from the school to OutKick: USC has consistently, with NCAA rules, promptly and accurately responded to all requests from the University of Tennessee related to the eligibility of Brew McCoy. At no point since Brew entered the transfer portal in January have we objected to him being made immediately eligible to play at Tennessee. The issue of Brew's eligibility ultimately rests with the NCAA, and we wish him the very best. So last week, we were discussing with Trey, Chad, about is this an NCAA issue or a USC issue? USC is saying it's an NCAA issue, where I think the feedback we've received is this is a discrepancy between the player and the university, not the NCAA and the transfer.
So this is a case of USC giving you an incomplete truth. This is like an incomplete assignment report card that they're giving you. You laid out the statement that they first gave Trey Wallace of OutKick, and great reporting by Trey on that story. Then they later issued another statement about this is what we're doing right now, and this is what we've done. We haven't hindered Brew in any way. Well, the fact is they have hindered him because they could, and this is another guest of ours, Austin Price, has reported, they could file a waiver. There's a piece of paperwork they could essentially sign.
A no participation opportunity form.
There you go. And this would be over. And they have not done that. They've just let it out. Hey, we're not stopping him. We're also not going to sign that piece of paperwork that'll get him eligible immediately, but we're not stopping him. We'll let the NCAA decide on this transfer. I think it is incredibly dumb of USC to play this game considering the hypocrisy of a program that hired a coach away from Oklahoma, took their future and their star quarterback in Caleb Williams, took Jordan Addison from Pitt. We can go on down the list. Now, there's a history of players going from USC to Tennessee. Whatever. Just sign the paperwork. When a guy doesn't want to be at your place anymore, Lincoln Riley never coached Brew McCoy. There's no attachment to Brew McCoy with him.
Well, Chad, help me with this, though.
Get your university to sign off on it.
So this is not about – this doesn't seem – it's not about USC and Tennessee. This is about USC and Brew McCoy. So what has McCoy done that is not allowing the Trojan athletic program to either file this form or grant some access through the NCAA where the NCAA rules and allows him to be immediately eligible? That's the other part of this. Tennessee and USC in conjunction could file something with the NCAA, and then you'd have some ruling on this.
See, I just don't even care. But I think where we are right now in college athletics, it just does not do anything for you to play this game and not just help the guy go somewhere else.
And I'm not disagreeing with you at all. I wish they'd sign off on it and let the guy play because everyone's playing. But in an era where everyone's playing immediately, they're not letting him do that. So I'm trying to figure out why they're not letting him do that.
There was some campus incident I'm not privy to that he was never charged for a crime on,
right.
But there was some holdup with like campus judicial committee at USC. Now,
so nothing to do with the football program.
If you're not charged for a crime, if there's some dust up on campus, whatever, I don't know how that would affect his playing and school eligibility at another institution. That's why I'm confused why USC won't just sign the paperwork needed to let him play. But here's the other thing. I just don't care. I would say the same about any program, any school. When a guy wants to leave, it's not going to do you any good in the long run not to just help them get out of there and move on, because you're going to take someone else from another program.
So
this is the way the game is played now. You let them go. Let them play somewhere else. I don't think USC's being completely honest with all this. I think it makes them look bad. Brent Hubbs told us on Friday this is not a Lincoln Riley issue, a football issue. It's a university issue. Here's my response to that. It is absolutely a Lincoln Riley issue. He is USC. He is the most prominent face of USC. I don't want to hear that Lincoln Riley is some powerless little weakling that the big bad university is holding back the paperwork on Brew McCoy and Lincoln Riley can't do anything about it. That is BS. This is a Lincoln Riley problem now. Tennessee needs to get more aggressive with things like this and put the pressure. Tennessee fans will do it, on Twitter all day. That's why USC's releasing statements, because they're getting beaten over the head by Tennessee fans about it.
The whole McCoy saga is back in 2019 with USC. So he originally is going to USC. Correct me if I'm wrong here. He then decides that he is going to transfer to Texas after then Trojans offensive coordinator Cliff Kingsbury took the Arizona Cardinals job. So Kingsbury's out. He's now in year one. Brew McCoy goes to Texas. He went through spring practice and then decided he had made the wrong decision and went back to USC.
Yep.
Didn't play in 2020. I'm thinking I'm getting the correct, or he didn't play in 2019. He did play in 2020. And, of course, we know he's now transferring in 2022 to Tennessee. So there's been this back and forth there on top of whatever's going on behind the scenes. It's just it's a mess that doesn't seem like it needs to be one. And the fact we can't get a clear answer on it where, from Tennessee's perspective, even if they're not pressing the issue publicly, behind the scenes we know they are. Heupel's been asked about. Heupel says he's done everything in his power that he can do in order for eligibility to be granted to McCoy. It's important to them because McCoy, Hubs told us this on Friday, he's a starter. He's starting in this offense in week one next Thursday night.
Yeah, it's Cedric Tillman, it's him, and it's Jalen Hyatt.
But I've got to think, like,
that's a really good trio of receivers talent-wise if you can pull that off. But he's got to be eligible.
But Tennessee has some solid reporters. We have two of them on weekly with Austin and with Brent. Trey does a tremendous job as well at OutKick, where they're trying to find out exactly the root of this. But the fact we don't have a concise, in black and white, on paper, written on the site, here's why he's not eligible. That, to me, tells me that there's some weird stuff behind the scenes politically. Politically meaning, like, there's somebody who doesn't want him to have the right to leave, even though in this era, everybody has the right to leave and play immediately. That's what's weird about it, Chad.
Well, either he's...
And I just want to know what possibly could have happened behind the scenes where if they want him out or they don't want him eligible to play at USC, what difference does it make if he leaves and plays at Tennessee?
I mean, he'd have to be in prison to have something like that.
Right.
This, again, I just keep coming back to it. They didn't charge him with any crimes. If you're telling me that he committed some awful crime and needs to serve time for it, then the legal system should carry that out. If he is academically eligible, which... apparently, he's academically eligible. Yeah. He was at USC. He is now at Tennessee. I just don't understand why they would hold this up. And here's the other part of this. Does anyone really believe the NCAA is going to figure this out before next Thursday?
No. The easiest route is to have this form
I was skeptical
signed
the entire time. When I saw Brew McCoy at the start of fall practice 3 weeks ago, when he was not yet cleared, I'm thinking he's not going to be cleared until probably midseason.
Yeah.
Because this is how the NCAA operates. And if he's not eligible to play right away, Lynn J. Dixon just went from Clemson to West Virginia to Knoxville in one offseason, spent 14 days with Tennessee, and is now leaving for another program. He was eligible all along the way, immediately, and he's going to be eligible wherever he goes next. When I first heard that Brew McCoy, there was any question of his eligibility, my first thought was, regardless of what Tennessee reporters were saying about the university's confidence and everything else, I'm thinking, no way. No way this guy suits up against Ball State to open the season.
Also,
and I'm still believing that.
I mean, Tennessee should get skip-the-line privilege here from the NCAA because they're the poster child for how you handle an internal investigation. The NCAA said that about how they investigated their former head coach, Jeremy Pruitt, based on their cooperation alone and their patience with this and the money spent. Well, granted, they're not having to spend the buyout money, but the money spent and the statement from these, they should get skip-the-line privilege to where they're front of the line. We're ruling on this immediately before the season starts. If, in fact, everything's been filed with them to where they can act on it. Instead of just, wait your turn.
Or we go back to the source and USC just signs this paperwork to get it done. Because USC knows exactly what they're doing when they kick this over to the NCAA. They know that he's not getting eligible quickly. So this is doing something to hurt the kid. And I don't know why you do that. If the guy's not in jail, what is the point?
Chad, Rookie of the Year odds. We're going to get to that coming up, and we will also preview the San Francisco 49ers and the Seattle Seahawks. One of these two teams will be good. Not great, but good. The other team, well, it seems as though they're in line for a top pick in next year's draft, but there have been teams that look bad on paper that end up shocking us all. We'll preview the 49ers and the Seahawks. Plus, we'll discuss the odds of offensive and defensive rookie of the year in the NFL. That's next on OutKick 360. OutKick 360 rolls on. Chad, the odds are out for the Rookie of the Year in the NFL?
They are indeed. This, according to BetMGM. And the top two odds, best odds to win NFL Rookie of the Year.
All right, I have not seen these. If you give me top two, Kenny Pickett is up there in the top two for me. I'm making the odds.
Kenny Pickett's teammate is ahead of him.
Really?
George Pickens. George Pickens is plus 850. Kenny Pickett plus 900.
So those are the top two?
Those are the top two.
Okay.
Both the same team.
So what they're saying is even if it's Trubisky that plays and Pickett doesn't win the job, that it's the rookie receiver who's going to benefit most. But Vince Young won Rookie of the Year and he played half the amount of games, right? But when he came in, all of a sudden he took a team that was 0-6 with Kerry Collins, and they went on a tear to finish 8-8 here in Nashville. And VY won Rookie of the Year in 2006. So Pickett would be along those same lines, where he doesn't have to start the season to win the award. Although I think it's more likely that it comes from a different team in a different position. I would look towards running back personally. Where do they have?
So that's funny you bring that up because third on the list is running back Breece Hall with the Jets.
Breece Hall is going to be
who
heavily
was
involved.
A third-round pick, I think, Breece Hall?
Yes. Yeah, that sounds right. So it's second or third, right?
Yeah.
Breece Hall is getting heavy usage with the Jets offense. Where is Kenneth Walker in Seattle?
Not on this list.
See,
I only have the top.
There is an outside
I have the top
sleeper.
6.
There's an outside sleeper.
The next 3 on the list, by the way, all wide receivers. Chris Olave in New Orleans, coming from Ohio State. Sky Moore with the Chiefs, who you've discussed some. And our guy, Arthur Smith's top receiver in Atlanta, Drake London.
Who survived an injury scare. Sky Moore
There's
right now.
There's not a huge difference, by the way, from Pickens, the best odds, to London. It's plus 850 to plus 1,200 between those 6 guys. So Pickett right now is plus 900, Breece Hall plus 1,000, Olave plus 1,000, Sky Moore plus 1,000, Drake London plus 1,200. That's 1 through 6 on the list.
Right now, I think I would lean Olave of that group. Breece Hall second of the 6 we're discussing, not the full list. Kenneth Walker is, to me, great value in Seattle, and we'll get to the team previews in a moment. But, Chad, the whole Pickens thing is interesting. Pickett has the odds-on chance because that's how we tend to vote. We, being the media, the fans, we tend to look quarterback first. And if Pickett somehow energizes that Steelers team, who was a playoff team, believe it or not, a year ago, we forget that, but becomes the first-round caliber quarterback in year 1, he's going to win the award ahead of Pickens, who's only going to touch the football every now and then compared to what Pickett would be doing with an opportunity to win it. Although George Pickens embodies the Steelers' mentality with the aggressive nature and kind of the swagger that he brings. It's perfect in Pittsburgh.
Yeah, that just jumped out to me, just having 2 guys on the same team.
Yeah.
We want to talk about just revamping your franchise in one offseason. The chance that Pickens and Pickett, or Pickett and Pickens, whichever way you want to go with it, that they make something happen in Pittsburgh. Pickens, Pickett, and Pittsburgh. That's difficult to say. But it may not be difficult to watch if these things work out.
And I try not to weigh too much into preseason performance. But defensively, I know this is only the offensive award. Defensively, it looks like Hutchinson's the guy. The odds-on favorite there, based on what I've seen in Detroit from him.
Speaking of odds-on favorite, the odds-on favorite right now to win NFL Coach of the Year is Dan Campbell in Detroit. And I think that the Hard Knocks exposure is a big part of that because that line has moved quite a bit since the show started.
So so this is similar to the quarterback thing. If you have a coach who takes a franchise that's been down and they win 7 or 8 games, where does that measure up with the team, the
greatness,
the coach that takes a team to the number 1 seed that hasn't been there yet?
According to BetMGM, nowhere, because all of the odds are in the favor of guys trying to, well, with one exception. Dan Campbell's got the best odds. Brandon Staley is second, so that's a guy trying to take the Chargers to the next step. Outside of that, it's Kevin O'Connell in Minnesota, Brian Daboll with the Giants, Nathaniel Hackett with Denver, who's got a big boost coming with Russell Wilson, and then Doug Peterson in Jacksonville.
But once the season starts, then all of a sudden you see Belichick, Vrabel, Andy Reid, because they start stacking wins. Cliff Kingsbury at one point last year, they were 7-0, right? You start stacking wins, and all of a sudden you're the greatest coach in the league. I wouldn't take any of those guys on those odds. I would bet down. I would bet to more of the teams that are going to be playoff eligible.
I think it's good to take the long shot bet now if you're doing that. Just from a practical standpoint, give it 2 weeks. Don't overreact to the first week, but after 2 weeks, you're probably going to get some odds in your favor if you're good at predicting what you think is going to happen with those races as the year goes on.
We'll have to check out the DraftKings, the odds there later this week.
Hey, quickly, you can always interact with the show on Twitter at OutKick360, at the Chad Withrow, at Hutton OutKick. Also, we heard from a viewer in Australia who watches our show, who said that he was loving the conversation about youth sports coaching. So I took my shot here, Hutton. You got to take shots at times in life. Okay. I said, it's great to hear from someone
age, sex, location.
From down under. I said,
sorry, that ties to the conversation
I heard
we had
I heard it was a man from Australia, so I immediately responded and said, what are you wearing?
ASL?
No. I responded and said, great to hear from a fan from down under. Always wanted to ask someone from Australia this. Your thoughts on Outback Steakhouse?
Oh.
I've always been curious about what the actual Australian people think about the American version of what Australian food is like. And Tommy responds and says, love the Outback Steakhouse, mate. My boy works in a sports bar down here called Sporting Globe, so always eating out somewhere. They follow the Ravens and the Orioles from down in Australia.
Interesting.
They're Ravens-Orioles fans, but now in Australia. So loves Outback Steakhouse.
I was cleaning out the closet this weekend and flipping through channels on the TV in the bedroom and found Crocodile Dundee 2. And watched the great finish to that wonderful film.
Crocodile Dundee 2. I'm trying to think.
That's when they're back in the bush.
Yeah,
with the Aborigines.
Because the original is great because it's basically in 3 parts, right? They have the where they start in the bush, then they go to New York City, and then I think the movie ends back in Australia.
That's Crocodile Dundee 2.
That's the second one?
Yes.
Okay.
With the shooting
original's
at the
a
end,
classic.
where they take your pants off scene. That's Crocodile Dundee 2.
Oh, okay. I need to go back and look. I've gone back on the First Blood, and I'm now halfway through First Blood Part 2. So I need to go back into the Crocodile Dundees next.
What was her name? Linda.
Oh, she's got I want to say it's like Ted Kaczynski, like the Unabomber.
Not that. Yeah, you're right.
Kostrimski?
I think they're still together. Her and Paul Hogan. Paul Hogan, who is alive and is probably in his 80s.
Last time I saw Paul Hogan, he was in.
He was in Crocodile Dundee 2.
No, I'll tell you what it was. He was in Along Came Polly with Ben Stiller and Jennifer Aniston.
I forgot about that.
And he's like an old billionaire who takes all these chances. And Ben Stiller's character is a risk analysis guy. So he's like an actuary, right, for an insurance company. And they're trying to put life insurance in this guy who's like base jumping, and he's in his 70s. And the actor, it's played by Paul Hogan, this character.
I'll have to look that.
And I'm going to be amazed if I look back and I completely made all this up, and that's not true at all. But I've got quite the imagination, if so.
We round out the NFC West with our look at the San Francisco 49ers. They add Charvarius Ward.
Linda Kozlowski.
There it is.
Sorry, I had to find it.
Charvarius Ward, shout out Blue Raiders. Drake Jackson, they add him in the draft. Also, they're losing some starting talent on the offensive line. Laken Tomlinson's gone. Tom Compton is one of their guards. Arden Key and DJ Jones are also off the roster. And Jimmy Garoppolo remains a 49er for now. His salary is fully guaranteed around, I believe, September 10th, Saturday, September 10th. So they're going to make a move either by trade or they're going to release this guy by the time things roll around because they haven't used him at all this preseason. They've had some agreement where he's not practicing with them. It's all been turned over to Trey Lance, who has been very good, to the point where when Patrick Mahomes is out playing into the second quarter this past week on the road in Minnesota, so it's not weather-related because you have the climate-free dome where they're playing in Minnesota, they elect not to play Trey Lance in the preseason game. I take that as a great sign for 49ers fans. And the fact that Shanahan, we all trust Shanahan, thinks that his quarterback, Trey Lance, is ready to go. George Kittle is, to me, the top guy in the league at the position. He's paid that way. If it's him or Kelsey, but they mean the exact same to their offense. And now you have the pieces in place, and you have the guys happy because of other. Deebo Samuel gets his contract extension. They have Nick Bosa on the opposite side, who is going to be on a tear for a big money, break-the-bank, top-level contract that we've never seen before for a non-quarterback whenever he signs next offseason. Point being, Chad, they're in a good position. And if they survive the injury woes, which have bugged this team and plagued this team over the recent seasons, early in the season, they're in contention for one of these playoff spots, one of the 7 playoff spots whenever December rolls around.
Remember that whole weird interaction with Javon Kinlaw and the reporter on the one thing?
Yeah.
I was looking through their defense before the show, and I immediately thought about that when I saw his name. Deebo Samuel's the only player in NFL history to have 1,200 receiving yards and over 300 rushing yards in a season, which is remarkable. Brandon Ayuk was in the doghouse as a first-round pick, and he had a great final 8 games of the season last year. Elijah Mitchell,
he's back and healthy.
He hit it as a rookie with the 49ers. Defensively, I don't see much of a drop-off with this group that was 3rd in the league this past year. I mean, we're going to get into another team here where obviously the huge, not just a question mark, but a gaping hole resides at the quarterback position. It's all about Trey Lance. This whole organization is all about the decision to move on from Jimmy Garoppolo, to not accept good for the chance at great. And we don't know that Trey Lance is even good right now. He may be far worse than Jimmy Garoppolo when he starts playing, but that's the risk that Kyle Shanahan was willing to take, was to get rid of good, to chase great. And we start to find out here in a couple weeks if they can be truly great with Trey Lance. That, to me, that's it for this 49ers team and what their franchise is going to look like in the next few years.
You can't just judge on paper wins and losses in the NFL. Things happen week to week. Injuries occur. Players get nicked and bruised, and they miss a series or something that ends up playing a significant factor in the game. But for Trey Lance to open the season on the road, they're playing at Chicago. They will then host the Seahawks. Those are the first 2 games out of the chute. It's not like they're facing the Cowboys and the Rams from the NFC or Green Bay and L.A. Right out of the gate here. I like the way the schedule sets up because they have the Bears, Seahawks, and Broncos before they will even face the Rams, and after that they face the Panthers. I mean, it's a very manageable schedule for a young quarterback, and I think Deebo Samuel, while he may not reset the same numbers he had a year ago in rushing and receiving, I think that's a great sign because he was only breaking that record because they were so banged up in the backfield a year ago. They moved him there out of necessity, and it worked out great. I think they'll use him some there, maybe not nearly as much. They get him involved more in the passing game as an extension of the run game. At least that's how I see things going for Deebo Samuel. And I like what I've seen from Trey Lance in the limited scope that we've been able to view him from. 2 starts last year and 1 preseason start this year where he went on a long scoring drive, including a 73-yard bomb. So he looks on point. This has been his team, not just since camp started, but since the offseason started because they didn't have Garoppolo around on purpose. They've turned things over to him. And I think it's so far, it's a lot of this is due to Kyle Shanahan being there. So far, things are pointing in the right direction for the 49ers in that division to be a playoff contender. The same cannot be said for the Seattle Seahawks. They trade Russell Wilson, one of the top 5 trades in NFL history. If you start to think back on all the top trades team to team, Russell Wilson going to Denver and out of Seattle for a team that was 7-10 and replaced by Drew Lock. They get him in return. Charles Cross is a necessity. Their offensive line was atrocious a year ago. He's a huge help at offensive tackle. But they lose Bobby Wagner, key leadership. DJ Reed, Dwayne Brown's no longer there. He's now a New York Jet. Chad, this has been a team all offseason that's been rumored to be the next in line to land either via trade a quarterback or draft one that's going to matter. They didn't do either. And it looks as though with Pete Carroll back, they're in a rebuild mode, looking for the next quarterback of the future. It's not currently on the roster right now.
I mean, name an interesting player on this roster outside of DK Metcalf. I mean, this is just full rebuild mode. They can admit it or not.
Lockett. I would put Lockett on that. Lockett's phenomenal.
I mean, it's not worth spending a lot of time on this group because they're just completely uninteresting and not going to be very good. And it's a team that's in line. I love the Charles Cross pick out of Mississippi State. I'm with you on that. That's a nice building block for the future. But they got to go find a quarterback this next offseason. They know it. They don't have one right now. It's going to be a really bad team that's going to have a high draft pick.
Yeah, DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, and because I'm mentioning him for Rookie of the Year, Kenneth Walker is interesting. He will become a storyline.
That's a good one.
He'll become a storyline. But it's not a team that you're watching for the storylines, right? You're watching this team to see whether or not they end up with the first or second pick, because that will be the quarterback discussion.
Nothing about the Seahawks is as interesting as House of the Dragon. That right we can guarantee.
House of the Dragon, the most watched show in the history of HBO. We discuss episode 1 next on OutKick 360. The highest-rated premiere in HBO history, House of the Dragon, debuted on Sunday. Chad, how many people watch this show?
10 million. It's like 9.98 something million viewers for the premiere of House of Dragon.
I DVR'd and watched it last night.
To put that into context, by the way, just numbers-wise, before we get into our thoughts on the show, the series premiere of Game of Thrones, which was a big deal at the time and a big budget-type deal for HBO to secure the rights from George R.R. Martin, but also what they put into the show, 4.2 million viewers in 2011. So that's more than double for House of the Dragon. Now, it's unfair to compare the two because it's the success of Game of Thrones
and
what it became that fueled the start of this show.
For instance, I did not pick up on Game of Thrones until they were about to begin season 4 when I binged to catch up and then followed it weekly. This has been on the radar for a while, right? Like the anticipation for this and whether or not they would be able to follow up with different cast, vastly different storyline because you're going back in time 172 years to tell the setup story, the prequel of what we just saw over the course of, was it 7 or 8 seasons? 8 seasons. So I thought that would be very difficult. I thought they pulled it off, though, in episode 1, Chad, because while it did take me a while to get used to seeing the new faces and knowing, like, okay, I'm supposed to believe that this person is this, trying to, like, grasp the storyline of the family lineage. Aside from that, and I thought they did a pretty good job to start on trying to set up the backstory or the first story of how they became who they are. Aside from that, I thought they did some things throughout the episode that are very Game of Thrones-ish. And which, for instance, the birthing scene. That in and of itself is very disturbing, okay?
I fast-forwarded through that.
It's very disturbing. But that's on brand with the entire series of Game of Thrones. And once you've seen it all and you expect everybody to die, spoiler alert, Game of Thrones, they kill off a bunch of main characters, you're kind of like, what can you do to surprise me now? You've got to go back and start towing the line on things that are very uncomfortable to watch. And that's one of them. So as that's happened, I'm thinking, okay, this is how they're going to, like, twist the knife in the side and say, okay, this is how we're going to engage you in something you haven't seen before, but we're willing to go there.
When that rating screen pops up to start an episode on HBO or anywhere, and it reads like a novel of all the things to watch out for, nudity, strong sexual content, violence, gore, adult language. That's the way that it popped up.
End of the world
on
content.
The first episode, and I'm thinking, okay, they're definitely going to be very Game of Thrones with this. I mean, you mentioned one disturbing scene, which we didn't even mention that a man was castrated also in this episode.
No, but that's
on camera, but that's very Game of Thrones-like.
Right.
The exposition of it bothered some. Jacob Swanson in our staff one. He said, I thought they just went out of their way to, this is a Game of Thrones for dummies type show. Yeah. Here's what you need to watch. Here are the main characters. Here's how we're laying out the season. And I agree, but it didn't make it any less enjoyable. And I understand why they're doing that, because they don't want to turn off someone who hasn't seen Game of Thrones, that just wants to watch an entertaining show, to where you get that opening title card sequence that tells you exactly what time you're in and how it relates to Game of Thrones. But the way they explain it, it's not going to turn off someone who doesn't read George R.R. Martin's fantasy fiction or isn't into the first series. So I thought it was very smart of HBO the way they did it. Thought the acting was good. The characters were pretty compelling. It's very clear how it's set up. There's going to be twists along the way. I'm assuming that's going to surprise everyone. No huge surprises in episode 1.
No.
But very solid, very entertaining. So came out of the gate swinging. I thought they delivered in what you need to in a pilot episode.
Let me be overly critical for a show I'm going to continue to watch. Okay. They were way over the top in telling us, be on the lookout for this storyline as the first season continues, without telling us.
Yeah, the exposition that they were laying everything up very obviously.
But throughout the entire episode, like, this is a big moment you need to pay attention to. Without having that blinking sign on the screen, it was obvious, where I thought Game of Thrones was much more subtle with that. Number 2, the characters itself from the first episode of Game of Thrones, you see Peter Dinklage and you see Lena Headey and there are very engaging characters that you want to learn more about. Everybody in this show, to me, so far, looks exactly the same. And it's because they're all from the Targaryen family. But, there's no differentiating who's who, really, other than the guy that wants to sit on the throne who's not there. But really, that's all we kind of know to this point. After episode 1, as boring as episode 1 was of the entire series of Game of Thrones, you wanted to see the character development because of how they set up that scene where they ride into Winterfell with the king, and you have Ned Stark, and you have Tyrion Lannister. You have everyone there. Sansa is there. There wasn't enough of that for me in this.
A couple of big things before we run out of time. There's a black character that's interesting to me in the first episode, which was different. Olivia Cook's a big-time actress, did not appear in the premiere and is going to be a big part of this show.
Okay.
To my knowledge, she was not in it at all. Yeah, she is a brunette, but she is going to be...
she's going to play an older version of a character we've seen.
Yes, more than likely. So she's not in it yet. The one mysterious character to me was the guy that was in the jousting that was all the girls were crushing on.
Yeah.
That we really don't know much about that you saw that's going to become a bigger character also. Again, I thought it was entertaining. I thought it was solid. It was very easy to comprehend for those that have not seen Game of Thrones.
I was stunned.
And 10 million viewers.
I was stunned at the viewership.
I was too.
10 million. And they did a lot of build-up trying to get you to binge it because they were playing it weekend after weekend.
Well, you forget episodic shows that are appointment watching can still get numbers like that on HBO because everybody binges everything whenever they want.
10 million. Hey, we're back at it tomorrow. 3 o'clock Eastern, 2 o'clock Central for OutKick 360. Hope you'll join us across the OutKick Network and at OutKick.com.